Yep. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Rob Carter. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a health economist and I'm a investigator on the CRE. I've been asked to talk about the meaning of efficiency, which is a good question for an economist, I guess. And when I was asked to do that, I actually thought of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And the similarity is that in that show, one of the things they were trying to do is define the meaning of life. And trying to define efficiency is a little bit like trying to define the meaning of life, in the sense that many people are seeking it or trying to find it. It's often misunderstood. And of course, it means different things to different people. Now, if I can get my... Oops, here we go. Okay, so if it means different things, then I thought I would start by talking about what it isn't. And one of the things that many people misunderstand efficiency for, of course, is cost cutting or trying to pursue affordability. And I'd like to illustrate that concept with this little cartoon, which I quite like. And here you'll see it's the good ship Endeavour, and you have the sort of management up the top here. The big boss is down here, I guess. And you can see what they're saying here. I don't get it. After all the budget cuts to streamline the workforce, why aren't we moving faster? And of course, they've cut so much, you've got just one poor little rower down here trying to achieve it. And I think that illustrates quite nicely the difference between economic efficiency and affordability. Because when you're talking about economic efficiency, it's inherently a relationship between resource use and outcomes. So it's really important to focus on that ratio between resources and what you achieve for it. So if we take that notion a bit further, here's a couple of situations which you might not normally think about as being about improving efficiency. So the first one is we're decreasing costs, i.e. we're saving money, we're actually reducing expenditure. But in doing so, benefit has actually decreased by more. So here's a cost-cutting measure that's actually decreased economic efficiency, okay? Because benefit has actually decreased by more than cost. Then you have the opposite situation to that, where you can spend more, but benefit increases by more than the cost. And again, you're spending more money here, but it's also an efficient change this time. So this is inefficient in saving money. This is actually improving efficiency by spending money. And so it's inherently that relationship between cost and outcomes where this meaning of economic efficiency lies. So if it's a relationship between cost and benefit, then the notion of benefit is really important. And when you think about the notion of benefit, then what you're really thinking about is, well, what are you trying to achieve? And that kind of reminds me of the Alice in Wonderland story. And by the way, this little fella, which was a blue caterpillar, I looked up the story and I tried to find the name, and all they call him is the hooker smoking caterpillar. So that's his name, hooker smoking caterpillar. But anyway, to come back to the story, Alice meets up with the blue caterpillar, and being lost in Wonderland, she says, well, where do I go? And the caterpillar says, well, where do you want to go? And Alice says, I don't know. And of course, the caterpillar says, then it doesn't really matter where you go, does it? And it's a nice little illustration of saying the notion of economic efficiency is actually a derived concept. It depends upon what you're trying to achieve. and what you want to get out of your use of resources. So now, having made that, I guess, basic point, I now want to do two things. I want to illustrate the notion of efficiency in the basic context of economic evaluation. Now, what I've got here is a set of crosshairs, and what we're thinking about here is some intervention that's going to change current practice. So what we're looking at here is the cost difference between going for the intervention and staying with current practice. Up here, you actually spend more money to implement your change. Down here, if you implement your change, you actually save money. You get cost offsets. Over here, the effect difference is actually the benefit of what you're trying to achieve. And here you actually achieve a positive benefit. And on this side, you achieve a negative benefit. And this diagram is really useful because it can illustrate the basic outcomes of trying to undertake an economic evaluation when you're actually looking at an option for change. And how would you interpret that? Well, I'm going to start here in sector 4 because here, what we find is the option for change is less effective than current practice, and it's also more costly. Well, why would you do that? I mean, it's actually dominated. Costs more and achieves less. So you wouldn't do that. If you're down in here, you have an intervention that's more effective because it's on the cost side and it's less costly. So it achieves better outcomes and it saves money. So that's dominant. You would certainly do that. And we have some of these, it's kind of low-hanging fruit, but not too many of them. Most interventions are actually in these two sectors. I'm going to start with this one down here because it's ethically challenging. Why I say that is that here it's less effective, but it saves money. Okay, so you have a ratio here where you've got negative costs or saving money, but it actually achieves less. And a little bit depends upon the ethics of winding back in terms of what's the impact of that. And over here in sector 1 is the situation where most interventions for change fall. To achieve something, to achieve a change, you have to spend more money. So, and in spending more money, it's more effective. Okay, so this is where most options for change fall, and you've got to somehow ascertain what is value for money. And that's what this line is here. If it were what we call a cost utility study, where we measure outcomes in quality adjusted life years, it would be cost per quality adjusted life year. And what we know from expenditure in Australia is that about 50,000 per quality is value for money. So if you're this side of that line, down into here where it's dominant, they're cost effective. If you're that side of that line, it's higher than 50,000 per quality, that money would be better spent elsewhere, or it's over here. So that's the way the notion of economic efficiency is often used in economic evaluation. Now I'm going to introduce a broader concept where you use the notion of economic efficiency, but in macroeconomics. And what I'm going to try to distinguish between is a notion of productive efficiency and allocative efficiency, okay? Productive efficiency and allocative efficiency. What you'll find is that health economists love drawing diagrams, and we'll have a diagram for every occasion. And what I've got here is what's called a production possibilities curve. Simply put, what it means is if we have two items like consumer goods and capital, so capital and consumer goods, what's the best that we could actually produce? So it's both an engineering concept of the production function, how you go about producing things, and the cost of those inputs. So in other words, if you're on this line, that's the maximum output you could produce with the stock of capital goods and consumer goods that you have. You would be inefficient if you were at E, i.e. you're inside that production possibility curves, you're inefficient, and you should be able to move out to be on that line. You can't go beyond that line because it's simply impossible. You know, with the productive relationships available to you, to the factors of production, this is the best you can do. And so that's this notion of productive efficiency. What's the best thing you can do with the resources available to you? It's sometimes expressed as maximizing output with the available resources. The other way it can be thought about is minimizing cost for a set outcome. But it's all about the production side or the supply side. In this one, you would have seen in this diagram, all we've done here is to say, now we have multiple points on this production possibility curve. They all have a tangent here, which is the way they're often measured in terms of the ratio between the capital goods and consumer goods. And the question is, what's the right point? And the answer is, well, it depends what people want. In other words, if you simply look at production, you could be very efficient in producing something that nobody wants. And so the idea is, and that takes you into allocative efficiency, what is it that we actually want? For example, what do we want from our healthcare sector? Do we simply want to maximize health? Are we concerned about equity? Who gets that health? Are we concerned about affordability, etc.? And in this diagram, it's captured by what's called the social indifference curve. And so of all the things you could do with this combination of capital and consumer goods, the right point is Z, where it intersects with what people actually want. And that's an important issue. So if I were to illustrate that with a healthcare program, then we were thinking about various screening programs. And if you were thinking about, say, breast cancer screening, what you'd want to do is to say the productive efficiency question would be, what age group do I screen? What screening modality do I choose? How often do I screen them? And so you'd want to get that combination of those key design features, which was the most productively efficient. And then if you were choosing, you'd say, let me now compare breast cancer screening with cervical cancer screening, with skin cancer screening, etc. And which is effectively this one here, you'd pick the one that actually reflected what people wanted. Now, I'm just noticing I'm getting close to the end of my 15 minutes. And so to wind this up, I guess what I thought I'd close with is, well, is the notion of economic efficiency something to be feared? Is it about doom and gloom, or is it that bright rainbow that's going to take us to the bright future? And in thinking about this, I often like to quote Alan Williams, who was a really important health economist, and he wrote this article called "The Cheerful Face of the Dismal Science," because economics is often called the dismal science. So let me just read this to you. I think a lot of the suspicion about health economics and about health economists is the belief that our view of people is simply that they are potentially productive resources, that their value stems solely from that attribute, and therefore that the most cost-effective way of caring for the elderly or the mentally or physically handicapped is to kill them off as quickly and cheaply as possible. If that were in fact our position, we should undoubtedly deserve any hostility that came our way. But fortunately, it isn't. And I can reassure you of that what we're really on about with this notion of economic efficiency is, let's think through what we want to achieve, and then how do we maximize that with those resources that are available to us. So in finishing up, I've just been asked to put this slide up for you. So thank you for listening. And if you wanted to talk to us about what you've heard today or about any of the talks that you're going to hear over this series, You could email us at this address, cpachieve@mcri.edu.au. You could follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And there's also going to be a CP Achieve website that we'll be launching shortly. So I might stop there. We may have time for a question or two.